Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS.
Congress should be coming back and moving on emergency needs immediately.
The 4-year-long nightmare for the American auto worker ends the day I take the oath of office, January 20th, it ends.
They need to protect dreamers, protect immigrant families all over the United States.
Hi, I'm Scott McFarland, CBS News Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Hurricane Milton has now moved out into the Atlantic, but in its wake, a path of death and destruction. There are communities flooded, there are homes destroyed due to the high winds and tornadoes, and power is cut to millions. And the storm is not even sparing the roof of the Tampa Bay Rays Tropicana field. The first responders who were using it as a base were forced to flee and find shelter from the 100-mile-per-hour winds and the blowing debris. Both the Harris and Trump teams are weighing in on Hurricane Milton. Vice President Harris has been briefed on the unfolding situation there in Florida. Former President Trump continued to spread false claims during a rally last night that FEMA is diverting disaster relief and giving the funds to migrants. Tonight, former President Barack Obama kicks off a multi-swing state blitz in support of Vice President Harris with an event in Pittsburgh. Harris, meanwhile, will rally near Phoenix. And former President Trump spoke this afternoon to the Detroit Economic Club in Michigan. Well, we begin tonight with CBS News national correspondent Manuel Bojorquez, who's been covering this in Orlando. Manny, first of all, give us a sense of the conditions on the ground where you are.
Well, as you can see, there's still a lot of flooding left behind in this particular neighborhood. We're standing on a road, but you may not know it until you look back there and you see those mailboxes. That also gives you a sense of how high the water came in this neighborhood. And it's actually gone down from when we first arrived. And when deputies first arrived here early this morning, they said the water was waist deep. And there were some people in homes who did not want to leave. So they've had to use boats today or even walking, trying to get through this water. These people didn't want to be rescued. But on either side of us here along the coast, we did see water rescues throughout the morning and throughout the day over in Tampa, St. Pete, and in Daytona Beach. That gives you a sense of the devastation and how large the area was, not only here in the central part of the state, but as you know, the first reported deaths were actually from tornadoes close to Fort Lauderdale, a little bit north of there, but that's where you also had tornadoes hitting the ground there. So all kinds of impacts from this storm over a very wide area.
How quickly can the state shift into recovery mode or rebuilding mode?
Well, you have to remember that they were already in some way, shape, or form in recovery and rebuilding mode from 2 weeks ago, getting hit by Helene. So this has created a whole new mess on top of an old mess. So it will be some time. The first priority, of course, is to rescue people, to get them out of harm's way, and then to assess the damage. And they've already started to assess here in the Orlando area as we drove around. You have the power crews already out and about trying to restore power, people already trying to clean debris and clear trees from roadways. Again, Orlando not hit as bad as those other parts where the recovery now on top of Helene could take anywhere from months to years.
In Orlando, Manny Bojorquez, thank you very much. In the meantime, President Biden is calling on Congress to come back to Washington to pass more funding for disaster relief. He said FEMA has what it needs to respond to Hurricanes Milton and Helene, but that a federal program to help small businesses impacted by disasters needs more money, and soon. Our Natalie Brand spoke with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg about the administration's response to the storms.
Yeah, we're still getting information in, but what we're seeing is a lot of progress in Florida already toward getting key transportation networks restored and getting those resources in to help people get back to normal.
So let's go to the White House. Nancy Cordes joins us there now. Nancy, you asked President Biden about the issue of funding. Let's take a listen to what he said.
How much time does Congress have to act before FEMA or the SBA run out of money?
That's in discussion now. I don't want to mislead you. I think in terms of the SBA, it's pretty right at the edge right now. And I think the Congress should be coming back and moving on the emergency needs immediately, and they're going to have to come back after the election as well, because this is going to be a long haul for total rebuilding.
He says it's running out now, and Congress isn't scheduled to come back until the week after the election in November. So what's the outreach been between the administration and the lawmakers?
Well, it's interesting, Scott, because I followed up by asking the president, well, then have you spoken to the House Speaker to urge him to bring Congress back, to go back into session to pass this additional disaster relief funding? And he said no. He hadn't spoken to him. The reality is that House members on the right and the left are all back in their home districts campaigning furiously right now. They'd rather not come back if they don't absolutely have to. And so that's why it appears there's a little wiggle room right now. The president is saying he'd like Congress to come back. He's stopping short of demanding that they come back. But the administrator for the SBA is saying publicly that they are going to run out of money by the end of this month. And that is crucial funding, Scott, because that is the money that they use to make low-interest loans for people in the disaster area whose homes have been damaged or destroyed and need those loans in order to rebuild. If the SBA isn't replenished, that means FEMA has to spend more money, get more money out the door to provide assistance. And FEMA is running low as well. And so you've got federal officials on a daily basis crunching the numbers, trying to figure out just how much longer these two programs can last, whether they can make it until the week after Election Day, as you noted, when Congress is going to be coming back.
I also should add there's no plans announced by the Democratic Senate leaders to come back to town either, which means this is a bicameral and bipartisan issue. So much time and space and energy has been spent by the administration over the last 48 hours talking about the danger of misinformation that's swirling around the storm. What were they saying today?
Well, the president himself called out Donald Trump for a second straight day. He said that the false information that he is spreading is un-American. He called it bizarre. He said that it needed to stop. According to our count at CBS News, former President Trump has said at least 19 times over the past couple of weeks that FEMA is somehow hanging these hurricane victims out to dry, is not providing assistance, or that the money is being diverted elsewhere. That is not true. Republican officials from these states have said it is not true, and yet Trump keeps repeating it even today. And here was a really striking comment, Scott, from the Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, who is in the disaster zone in North Carolina. He said that rumors like that are spreading online, and they're even spreading throughout the disaster area and having profound effects. He said that there's this false claim running around that somehow FEMA officials are going to seize the land of hurricane victims. And he said that has caused some victims to be afraid to come forward and claim the assistance that they deserve and that they're entitled to because they're worried that somehow their land will be taken away. So this isn't just campaign rhetoric. It is actually having an impact on people who have already suffered so much.
The moment we have left, Nancy, these weren't just two hurricanes days apart. These were two uniquely powerful hurricanes days apart. How's the administration juggling the aftermath of each?
Well, they say that they have sent more than 15 million meals to the disaster area, both from Milton and from Helene. Something like 15 or 20 million liters of water. But FEMA has a set amount of disaster relief funds every year, Scott. It's about $20 billion. And in just the first 8 days of this fiscal year, they've already blown through nearly half of it. And so that gives you a sense of why there's such great concern about exactly when Congress is going to need to come back to replenish those funds.
At the White House, Nancy Cordes, thanks.
You're welcome.
Attorneys for former President Trump submitted a request to have no further information in special counsel Jack Smith's election interference case made public. Today was the deadline for the former president to respond to the special counsel's recent court filings. And you may remember, those filings revealed details about Trump's alleged efforts to prevent the transfer of power after the results of the 2020 election were finalized. Trump's team argued in part, quote, there should be no further disclosures at this time of the so-called evidence the special counsel's office has unlawfully cherry-picked and mischaracterized during early voting in the 2024 presidential election. Judge Tanya Chutkan has already ruled she will allow the release of more information on the filings, but she's giving the former president a week to respond and potentially challenge it first. Former President Trump also took his economic pitch to Detroit today, what he's promising voters in that battleground state. Plus, Vice President Harris on a swing through the Southwest will explain how she's focusing on Latino voters there. You're streaming America Decides.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
of We the People.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America. Weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off.
That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Vice President Harris setting her sights on the Southwest tonight, participating in a Univision town hall in Las Vegas. She's also holding a rally outside Phoenix. The race is extremely tight in both of those battleground states. And our Weijia Jiang is following the vice president. She is in Chandler, Arizona. So Weijia, is the importance of this Sun Belt strategy shifting or changing at all for the Harris campaign?
Well, Scott, there are 4 critical battleground states that are located along the Sun Belt. Arizona. So much emphasis put on these states because, as you mentioned, the margin is so tight. And what's troubling for the Harris-Walz campaign, Scott, is that the margin of Latino voters Democratic nominees. And so they are well aware that they have to really increase their efforts, which is why just today they launched a new effort to go after Latino men called Hombres for Harris, why there are $370 million of ad buys that target this voting bloc, and why she is holding events like the town hall in Las Vegas that is hosted by Univision that will be broadcast nationwide, and the rally that will be held this evening right behind me, Scott. So they are aware that they have to try to make up the numbers, and they're using various ways to try to do that. But of course, time is ticking, Scott.
Oh, you speak about this Sunbelt strategy. What's the strategy for targeting Latino voters? How do you try to corral a very diversely political and diversely interested group?
So the campaign, they are, and you're absolutely right. That, is hard because obviously it's not a monolith. And so that's why they are using platforms like WhatsApp to use robust chat messaging to voters. They are also, in those ads I talked about, focused on healthcare, focused on the issues that they have identified as being important across the board, and really trying to excavate things about Harris when it comes to her economic plan, when it comes to social infrastructure that they believe can resonate with people. And they've also built a huge coalition of Spanish-speaking on the ground, really trying to communicate why they believe Harris is the better choice.
One of the most beautiful days of the year in the Blue Wall states in Washington. Weijia Jiang's in the heat in Chandler, Arizona. Thank you very much, Weijia. Former President Trump is holding campaign events in both Colorado and Nevada tomorrow after appearing in Michigan today. The Republican presidential nominee delivered remarks to the Detroit Economic Club, repeated his attacks of the Biden-Harris administration's response to Hurricanes Helene and Milton.
And I'd like to congratulate governors of Florida, Ron DeSantis, Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia and South Carolina, Henry McMaster. They were really hit hard, and they've done really a fantastic job. The federal government, on the other hand, has not done what you're supposed to be doing. In particular, with respect to North Carolina, they've let those people suffer unjustly.
The former president also laid out a pitch for strengthening the auto industry, but he slammed the city in which he was speaking. He warned the rest of the U.S. would, quote, end up being like Detroit if Vice President Harris is elected. Several Florida Republicans are now demanding more funds to boost recovery efforts in the wake of Hurricanes Helene and Milton, but their records on previous measures providing disaster relief may leave you scratching your heads. You're streaming America Decides.
On Face the Nation, we try to have an informed conversation about the essential issues of the day. The way to learn is to listen to the answers and to ask follow-up questions.
Why did you miss the moment?
I'm not sure why they missed the moment.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective. And that's why the face-to-face ones we have on Face the Nation are so important.
On America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
This case,
it's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Let's do it!
Let's go!
Let's do this!
I can see clearly now that the rain is gone.
Superstar approaching, superstar approaching.
Just get your popcorn and get ready.
Come on, Julia.
Oh, no.
I will if you will.
You go, Gail.
Yeah, boy!
Yeah!
dollar Jill.
If you can't get into the market, it's okay. Renting is fine.
Box, oh, it's bad. Screw cap, oh, it's bad. It's not true.
We are making a wonderful lemonade chicken.
Ooh, it's hot. That's good.
I wonder what Serena's doing. I wonder how Serena is feeling.
That's a really good question. No one's asked me that yet.
You're 70 years old? 70, yeah.
I'm 21.
We'll see you 7 o'clock sharp.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you.
Big news coming out of the NFL. A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With highlights.
What a finish at the final round of play.
And in-depth analysis.
Can they three-peat? Tony Romo joins the conversation.
What can you say about this game?
When you need your sports in a snap,
we're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
Find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
The CBS News original 60 Minutes opens its archives.
Pretty loose for a Friday night.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not my first show.
With moments you haven't heard before.
It's almost more fun that way when you have something to prove.
Listen to 60 Minutes, a second look, wherever you get your podcasts.
As the damage across Florida from Hurricane Milton is revealed, the politics of climate change and disaster relief are also coming into focus. CBS News national environmental correspondent David Schechter joins us now from Dallas to discuss that. David, let's start with the most recent bill Congress passed that provides disaster relief to Americans. What in it is most relevant post-hurricanes?
Sure. Well, it's $20 billion, and it funds FEMA's relief operations. It passed before anyone knew Helene or Milton were actually coming, but FEMA says it does have enough funds to meet the immediate needs of the people in Florida right now. The only votes against the measures came from Republicans that included Congressman Matt Gaetz and 10 other Florida representatives.
You know, the politicians in Florida include Governor Ron DeSantis, and he's been demanding disaster relief funds from Washington, too. Has he ever voted against something like this?
Scott, if you go back to 2012 and Hurricane Sandy, which hit New York and New Jersey, then Congressman DeSantis voted against federal aid. He said he sympathized with the victims, but that taking on more debt without a plan to offset the spending was not fiscally responsible.
Let's move over to the Senate. Obviously, two Florida Republican senators have been there a while. Rick Scott, Marco Rubio. Rick Scott up for re-election this year. How have they voted in the past on the issue of disaster relief?
Well, 2 years ago, they both voted against disaster relief after Hurricane Ian, which hit Florida and also hit the Carolinas. Both objected to non-disaster relief elements that were in that bill. This time around, both voted for this new $20 billion FEMA disaster relief package. But Scott complained that Florida and North Carolina would have gotten relief faster if they were renamed Lebanon and Ukraine.
There's this consensus in the scientific community that storms like Hurricane Milton have been made worse by climate change. But in Florida, there's been a history of politicians denying or minimizing climate change. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so one of the most notable examples of that came earlier this year. Governor DeSantis signed a law that removed references to the term climate change in the work of state government. It banned offshore wind turbines in state waters that would supply renewable energy, and it weakened regulations on natural gas pipelines. And while Republican Florida legislatures have approved millions in flood control, drinking, and wastewater infrastructure to protect against sea level rise, there are few Florida conservatives that support reducing carbon emissions as a solution to address the overall climate crisis.
Last week, I asked former President Trump if Hurricane Helene convinced him to do more about climate change, and he said, no, not really. David Schechter for us in Dallas. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Former President Barack Obama hitting the campaign trail for Vice President Harris. Next, we take you to Pittsburgh, where the former president's hoping to keep the Keystone State blue this November. You're streaming America Decides.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024? Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
If you don't like what's going on right now, don't complain. Don't get anxious. Don't throw up your hands in despair. Don't boo. Don't hashtag. Oh.
Former President Barack Obama has been a constant surrogate for Democrats in recent election cycles, and this year is no different. Former president's rallying for Vice President Harris in Pittsburgh tonight as he begins a multi-state swing for her this week. In Pittsburgh's where we find our Robert Costa, who's following the former president. All right, Bob, set the scene in Pittsburgh for us.
Hey, Scott, great to be with you from here in Western Pennsylvania. Former President Barack Obama will be on the stage right behind me in just under a couple hours to try to stitch together his own coalition from 2008 and 2012 for Vice President Harris and Governor Walz this time around. That means people of color. That means suburban voters. That means labor. All of those coalitions, all of those groups, core Democratic voters, remain targets for the Harris campaign. And there's a real private concern, I know you've heard it too, Scott, from some Democrats, that her support, Vice President Harris's support among labor members, among some voters in the urban areas in Pennsylvania and other swing states is a little bit soft. So by sending in former President Obama, there is a hope that he can get the energy on the ground in places like Western Pennsylvania, where former President Trump has long had a real groundswell of support in his own campaigns.
There's been an awful lot of focus on Pittsburgh by the Harris campaign, but where else is former President Obama going and focusing on?
Nothing has been set in stone yet, but based on my conversations with top Democrats, they expect former President Obama to go to Detroit, to go to Michigan, to also go to Milwaukee in Wisconsin, to maybe think about some of the suburban areas in Philadelphia and also go into the Atlanta area down in Georgia and maybe a little bit in North Carolina, which is back on the political battleground map. Obama did well there in 2008. There's a hope that if she doesn't win Pennsylvania, if somehow Trump drives a lot of voters in exurban and rural areas out to the polls, that she can come back with a win in the Deep South in North Carolina or Georgia.
You covered former President Obama for years. How does he differentiate his role as a surrogate? What's different about him as a surrogate on the stump?
He is someone who has such a built-in support network inside the Democratic Party. He's also a movement politician, someone who built a political movement, Hope and Change, in 2008. And you can see in the Harris campaigns, in its structure, in its thematic overtones, in its rhetoric, it's trying to come up with its own movement this time around. When you look around the arena here, you see a lot of posters and signs that say, "Yes, she can." And that, of course, is an echo of "Yes, we can," former President Obama's message in 2008. And Harris believes, inside the upper echelon of her campaign, that if she can have that political fire, that feel of a movement campaign in places like Western Pennsylvania, she has a real shot of winning this state and winning the White House. But it just can't be rote. It can't be routine. It has to have a little bit of that fire. Obama is seen as part of that project.
You've covered both men for so long. This many years later, how much does Obama still rattle former President Trump when he's out there campaigning against him?
Scott, we all remember that famous or infamous, depending on who you ask, the CPAC moment where President Obama really tweaked former President Trump, not CPAC, excuse me, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner over a decade ago. And that moment is searing in the memory of a lot of Trump supporters as former President Obama pushing Trump, maybe even pushing him to run. There's a lot of bad blood between Trump and Obama. You think about Trump questioning President Obama's credentials and love of country with the birther campaign back in 2011, 2012, and they have remained at odds ever since. And so you see in Obama someone who could draw Trump out, get Trump to fight a little bit, engage more. And for the Democrats I've spoken with, if Trump is fighting with Obama in this final stretch, that's fine with them. They like that fight. They like those dynamics publicly and how it could motivate Democratic voters to get out and fight.
In Pittsburgh, with Queen music as the background, Robert Costa, thank you very much. All right, let's bring in our political panel now. Jasmine Wright, politics reporter for Notice. Tom LoBianco, co-founder of and national political reporter for 24 Site News. Jasmine, let's start with this Obama visit to Pittsburgh. Is this coming too early, too late, or just when you'd expect it?
Look, there is no clearer sign that we are in the stretch to November than seeing Democrats bring out Obama, their biggest not-so-secret weapon, one of the Democrats' most popular politicians alive right now, because of the fact that he does exactly what Robert describes. He motivates Democratic voters. He motivates that base. And he also really is able to articulate probably the best of the Democratic Party, what is at stake for people to vote, because it's not just trying to get people enthusiastic about voting. The reason why they bring him out so late is because he also is really good at getting people to the polls and getting them to the polls early, particularly when the polls are everywhere, the hurricanes are affecting whether or not people are picking up their phones, right? People's phones are barely in North Carolina and Florida and other places, barely charged enough to call their parents. So they're not going to be talking to pollsters. So these campaigns are really having a deficit when it comes to real tangible numbers of where they should be surging their money in the last 3 weeks. And so getting people to the polls and polls early is giving them some of that data. And so that is why President Obama is being brought out in the last stretch here. Yes, to enthuse Democratic voters, but also to get people to the polls and cast their ballots as early as possible in these early voting states.
I'll bring you the same question, Tom, because I've heard this both ways. Have they wasted this opportunity in the weeks prior, or do you not want to bring the closer in before the 8th or 9th inning? What's your reporting, and how do you read that?
You know, Pennsylvania is interesting in terms of the dynamics. I've been writing about this a lot over at 24 Site News. It's mail-in. And if you look at, especially, you know, as one of the key contested states in 2020 and still now with all the blue wall, centerpiece of the blue wall, it's mail-in. Everything has to be mailed basically by the end of the month. Yep. Then they get counted on Election Day starting at 7 a.m. I was talking with a source on some numbers here. Republicans are cutting into that old advantage.
from 2020. And so the Democrats used to have that lockstep going into 2020. Not so much anymore. And, you know, again, Jasmine was talking here, this is why you bring in Obama. Because Obama goes into, it's turning out your base.
Yep.
It's getting people to show up, especially Philadelphia. Philly, the collar counties, 33, 34%, something like that, total vote turnout. You can amp that up. Conversely, for Trump, who has a hard ceiling in these places, turn it down. You know, some people might call that suppression. However they choose to do it, make sure those voters don't show up. And I think that's why you're seeing Obama, especially in Pittsburgh and Philly right now.
And we have Vice President Harris in Arizona, Jasmine, and you've been reporting on what you, I think, characterize as a possible numbers problem for her there. Explain that.
Yeah, I spent 4 days in Arizona, and I talked to people across the political spectrum in the Democratic Party and Republican Party and Independent Party. And the vibes there are people are hopeful but not optimistic, in part because they're running into this major problem that didn't exist in 2020, which is that 100,000 registered Democrats have left the state, and people are coming in droves to the state of Arizona, but they're registering as as Republicans or independents, which means that for the first time, Democrats not only have a surplus with Republicans, a major surplus, over 200,000 registered votes, but they also have, a deficit with Republicans. But they also have a deficit when it comes to the independents. Now independents have over 100,000 more registered voters than Democrats, which was a difference in 2020. And so they're trying to get over that huge hump, which means that they are reaching out to not just Democrats, because if every registered Democrat in the state voted, Democrats would still lose. But they have to reach out to Republicans, reach out to independents. And so I was with canvassers as they went and talked to Republicans and independents across the state, really trying to get them out. It's a difficult job. I was with Republicans for Harris, Mormons for Harris, these new coalitions that they've started to really try to diversify who is coming out and supporting Harris. Obviously, these folks are really modeled in the image of the late John McCain, moderate Republicans who don't like Trump, who don't like Carrie Lake, and who don't like extremism. So really trying to get them to really take that next step. If you don't like Trump, maybe you should vote for Vice President Harris, which is a tall order for a lot of Democrats for a lot of Republicans in a state that is traditionally Republican. And the last thing I'll say is it's not just reaching out to Republicans or reaching out to independents that are posing a problem for the campaign. People acknowledge it's also their numbers with Latino men. That's causing a lot of problems in a state like Arizona, where they are heavily important, and also more and more are leaning towards President Trump. So that's something that has Democrats concerned in the state as well. So again, hopeful, but not optimistic.
Former President Trump goes back to Arizona this weekend, too. There's a conventional wisdom, Tom, that perhaps he's best situated among the 7 battleground states in Arizona. Conventional wisdom is dangerous this year, so we don't take it as anything.
Sure.
What do you make of the issue of immigration and his prospects there as he comes to Arizona this weekend?
You know, it's fascinating with this, and this, you know, think back to the famous Republican autopsy of 2012. I can basically hear Reince Priebus gouging his ears out when he hears these poll numbers, because that was supposed to be the fix coming out of the Romney loss. That was, you need to be more inclusive. Well, it turns out, and certainly Trump and his people know this and are playing on it, the culture fights, the culture wars. You know, especially, you know, I've been thinking a lot about John Leguizamo, who's been out here doing the tours. He talks about the difference between Hispanics and Latinos, Latin America, as opposed to Tejanos, Mexico. Very culturally conservative. And what Trump has been doing with it's very sharp strategic media strategies here, going on the podcast, playing FanDuel, Sportsbook, playing to younger Black and Latino men. And it seems to be working. I mean, he's not going to win that cohort completely, but again, if at the margins, you can cut into that, you turn it into a race. That's exactly what he's done.
Just a moment left here, Jasmine, but this town hall the vice president's doing in Nevada, what's the significance of that?
I mean, it's getting into exactly what we're talking about. Her running up the numbers with Latino women, with Latino men, trying to suppress the success that we're seeing former President Trump have, because he could have some of the highest numbers that we've seen a Republican get in decades with Black voters, with Latino voters. So it's trying to talk to that base, particularly in such a key state of Nevada, a state that Harris has spent a lot of time in, not just since she replaced Biden, but as the Biden campaign announced that he would run for re-election last year. She's been there a couple times. So this is a really key state for her, particularly because they see their path to 270 with that blue wall, but they are trying to get all the other major swing states as well to try to really gin up those numbers.
Jasmine Wright, Tom LoBianco, you got a lot in there.
Yeah.
Quickly, thank you both for your time. Speaking of Arizona, in recent years, civility in our politics has largely become a thing of the past. But 15 years ago, John McCain, 15 years ago today, had a much different message.
I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not. No, ma'am. He's a decent family man, citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues.
We all know less than a month later, McCain would be defeated on election night by then candidate and future President Obama. But it's still being celebrated for that moment we just showed you. Democrats were able to flip Arizona from Republican to Democrat in 2020. Question is, can they do it again? Next, what Arizonans are telling CBS News about the state of the race in that state. You're streaming America Decides.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are. Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We come back with a trivia question. Prior to President Biden winning Arizona in 2020, when was the last time Democrats carried Arizona? Bill Clinton in the year 1996 come to mind. You are correct. Question is, will the state go blue again this November? Our Ed O'Keefe has become Mr. Arizona. Spoke with voters in that state over the last many days. So the key to winning Arizona, presumably, historically, has been Latino voters. Yeah. How many can you corral? How many can you bring to your camp? How's it going so far for the vice president?
Well, I was there over the course of the last 7 or 8 days or so, and there's a lot of concern among Democrats about whether Latino men especially may be slipping away from her for various reasons, as they were slipping away from President Biden as well. Encapsulated pretty well by a guy named Aureliano Dominguez, who we met with last week, and 100% registered Democrat, but a little skeptical. Listen to why. So you're a citizen.
Yes.
You were registered to vote?
Yes.
Who are you going to be voting for?
Well, right now, as many Americans, I think, we're confused. But I'm a registered Democrat. But I'm not 100% sure. I mean, they promised and nothing has happened. So what's the difference now?
What more would you need to hear from her in order to get you to vote for her?
Well, there's so many things, you know, and the truth of the matter is that we may hear it, whether they do or not, who knows, right. You know, and it hasn't happened, you know. But we really need something to happen to our Latino community. We need that those people that have been here on the shadows for many, many years, and they work hard, they pay taxes, and they have a moral conduct, you know, to be able to be granted some type of status to get out of the shadows.
And they've waited too long.
Yes.
So, immigration. You've been telling us for years you're going to do it. You haven't done it. Promise hasn't been fulfilled. Plus, concerns about cost, which is really the big reason why Democrats are concerned, men especially who are Latino might break away, is they have real concerns about inflation. Look, they work, they drive to work, they're dealing with dollars and cents all day long, they're seeing it, and they're concerned about it.
You also spoke with a dreamer, somebody who's benefited from that initiative. What'd you get from that conversation?
So a guy named Angel, who in some ways matches what dreamers are, or who they are, those kids of people who came here illegally themselves, but who've raised children who know no other place but here as their home. Many of those dreamers now are in their 40s and have kids of their own. Some of them, though, are closer to Angel's age. And he really encapsulates the values issue that a lot of people like Aureliano, who we heard from, say, you know, these people need to be dealt with. They need to be given some kind of status. They've been waiting for too long in the shadows. Angel isn't in the shadows, but describes really the concern about this and why something has to be done.
Yes. So, I mean, being an immigrant, we view the world from an immigrant lens. We're always contributing not only to like state and local taxes, but to our communities in a myriad of ways. And meanwhile, we don't receive any public benefits, we can't vote, and it's just getting a lot harder to exist as an undocumented person here, as an undocumented dreamer.
And why is that, most obviously to you?
I feel like rhetoric has definitely shifted over time. Now, everyone is talking about the border. Nobody's talking about dreamers. Everyone's talking about how crime is coming in, how these are the people that are coming, but from what we see here in Arizona, these are family members, these are mothers bringing their children for the opportunity to work hard, for the opportunity to be successful, and for the opportunity to contribute.
So if Kamala Harris or Donald Trump called you tomorrow and said, Angel, what do I need to do about immigration? What would you tell them?
I would tell them that they need to protect dreamers, protect immigrant families all over the United States. These are people that have lived here for a lot of years and have already been contributing to the economy and to society. So definitely protecting them and not demonizing them.
Finding a way to allow those people to stay in this country legally, safely, will go a long way to assuaging the concerns and the skepticism that a lot of Latino voters, especially in the Southwest, have with the Democratic Party right now. Not only at the presidential level, but at the congressional level.
It's another one of those battleground states that also has a high-profile Senate race.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a close one, but a high-profile one. Kari Lake, Ruben Gallego. How's that impacting the presidential race in your measure?
Well, to your point about it not being close, it's certainly not close by 2024 standards, and that it looks like Gallego may be pulling away by high single digits. Some have him at double digits, but nothing's won in Arizona by double digits anymore. So if he's pulling ahead of her, 4, 5, 6 points, which could conceivably happen, the hope is he's helping drag Vice President Harris across the line as well. But watch him especially. We focus on, we surmise about, we dream about the concept of split ticket voting becoming a thing again. He may be one of the few Democrats running for Senate or for governor in this country who see a significant chunk of crossover votes. There was one statewide poll last week that suggested as many as 13% of the state's registered Republicans will be voting for him instead of Kari Lake because of how she's denounced the sort of McCain heritage version of the Republican Party in that state. It'll be one to watch, especially for signs that voters are picking from column red and from column blue.
Really close state races in 2022. They have a couple of congressional races worth watching this year as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Ed O'Keefe, thanks, man.
Good to see you.
Ethel Kennedy, widow of the late Senator Robert Kennedy, has died. Ethel Kennedy was known for her work as a human rights advocate. Her grandson, former Massachusetts Congressman Joe Kennedy III, confirmed she suffered a stroke in her sleep last week, and she died today due to complications from that stroke. Ethel founded a human rights center months after her husband's assassination and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom by then-President Obama for her involvement in social justice. Ethel Kennedy was 96 years old. There's been a lot of debate whether this election is more about joy or about fear. Next, the new study that gives insight into the hopes and the concerns of Americans. You're streaming America Decides.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
of We the People.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling. You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening. It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide. America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, Half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
A new report is revealing how Americans are feeling about their communities and the country heading into Election Day. It found 76% of Americans are hopeful for the future of their communities, and that number includes 78% of working class Americans. When it comes to the long-term future of the United States, that number dips to 55% for the country and 47% among working class Americans. Let's bring in Dante Chinny, director of the American Communities Project based at Michigan State University. His organization has a new report titled, quote, Understanding America in 2024, which sounds a lot harder than perhaps the report undertook.
It is. America's a difficult place. It's complicated, and that's kind of what we get at.
Let's start with the optimistic things. Why are people feeling hopeful? What are the good things they're seeing?
So the reason people feel hopeful is they feel kind of good about their lives, as you were saying in the intro, and it's really because they think their life's going well. Like you just ask them, yeah, my life's going pretty well. Some places they have their faith gives them a lot of hope for the future and things like that. The one thing that was a little disappointing is we asked people just whether or not they're optimistic, something to feel good about. Are people generally good? Most people do not think that. The one exception was Mormon communities, where people did think people are generally good. But for the most part, the thing that makes people feel good about where they are and where things are going is their personal lives and where their community is at.
Does that seem inconsistent with this anti-incumbent sentiment that's indicated in President Biden's approval ratings and the polls?
Yeah, so it's interesting because, if people think their lives are going well, it is because we think that's what politics is, right? It's a reflection of like, how is my life going compared to how it was going? Should it be going a different way? These data suggest that people feel pretty good about themselves. The thing they don't feel good about is the country. And when it comes to the direction of the country, the thing that really showed was overwhelmingly across all the community types we look at, there was a sentiment of this terrible statement. It's just like, I feel the nation is falling apart. Every community we talked to felt that, with one exception. The big cities did not feel that, but every other community, 50% or more, said it seems like the nation's falling apart.
It seems consistent with that old bromide of love your congressman, hate Congress, where you like your hometown operation, you don't like the rest of the nation. Let's talk about the fears. Where are people most concerned?
So I think the thing they're most concerned about is they don't feel that, most people say, or lots of people say when you ask them, I don't recognize what the country has become, or I don't recognize what the country has become, they feel that way. More than 50% feel that way in a lot of different communities. I think the thing they're really worried about is many people feel, their leaders can't make the right decisions. They feel that, again, the country seems like, and again, it's just this vague feeling that the country's kind of falling apart, things are slipping away.
That feels especially true, according to your research, with the evangelical community. That things are changing too quickly. What's behind that?
So they were really interesting because we had these two questions about, like, I don't recognize what the country has become, and I think the country is changing too quickly. They were the one community that gave over 60% to both those questions.
Both.
Yeah, so that says, because a lot of people say, or a lot of different communities, people will say, I don't recognize the country. I don't identify what the country's become. But this idea that, like, we don't like the way things are moving. With these evangelical communities, it's like we don't like the way things are, and change is just like overwhelming us. It does feel like those places, and we've studied them for a little bit. They really are apart. They're a place apart from other parts of the country where I think the social conservatism, the culture in those places doesn't really align with what they see when they turn on the TV. And when they turn on the news.
What did you find when you asked about immigration, which we were told by so many players is a top issue, a top line issue?
So the one thing we found this year, because it's the second year we've done the survey, immigration rose as a top issue across the board in every one of these communities.
All of them?
Yes. That's pretty interesting. The thing that we found that was really kind of interesting and a little disconcerting in some ways, there are about 46 million immigrants in America, about 46 million. And very few people say that there is an immigrant that is part of their immediate social circle, that is somebody that's close, member of family, obviously, or friends. You're not getting, that number is like down in the 30s for some communities, in the 20s for some communities. And I think that that reflects something else we found in the study, which is we asked people true-false statements. We're going to reveal those later, but we revealed one in the survey, which is we said undocumented immigrants, true or false, undocumented immigrants commit more violent crime than other people. That is not true. It is a false statement. Almost every community believes that to be true. The places where they didn't are the places where people were most likely to get the correct answer, which is again false, that's not true. Big cities, urban suburbs, and Hispanic centers, places where people are most likely to know an immigrant. So it seems in the research, the more likely you are to just know any immigrant, the more likely you are to kind of be inoculated against this thing, which is falsehood.
Also consistent with areas with higher education levels where people
absolutely,
do some reading.
Except for the Hispanic centers where it's a little different. Not a lot of college degrees in those places, but a lot of people who are Hispanic, so a lot of people that are immigrants and people know people.
Dante Cheney, good work on this. Thanks for sharing with us.
Thank you.
Good seeing you again.
Yeah.
That does it for today. We're back with another edition of America Decides Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for October 10th, 2024. I'm Jerika Duncan in for John Dickerson. Floods, damaged buildings, and millions without power. Cleanup and